So of note, the engineers had discovered a problem with some of the compressors on their Cuber machines. In the documentation, you will find a cross-reference for replacement compressors, the old compressor that's failing and the new one. That's one method they found to cure the problem, and the problem relates to liquid flashing back to the compressor in defrost. The other way they've found to resolve that is to put an accumulator in the system. So you don't need to do both. If you have the proper replacement compressor, you do not need to put an accumulator in. However, if you're not able to source the replacement compressor, and in the kit you get, you may find that you get an old style compressor with an accumulator, and that's an acceptable practice to bring these machines back to service. So if you do put in a new compressor, you will find that there are some mechanical differences. In this machine in particular, I'll show you where the new compressor, the suction is a 3/8 port versus a 5/16 port. So you need to accommodate for that. There are technicians that will just take that 5/16 copper, throw it in at 3/8 port, and fill it in with solder. I'm not a fan of that method. I would prefer, at a minimum, and you'll see in my example, I didn't have 3/8 copper, so I swedged the end of the 5/16, and that outer diameter gives me a snug enough fit into that 3/8 port. So that's one method. The technicians will find their own methods to do that. This is just my suggestion. The ports are slightly different height, and you'll also find that the electrical is on the opposing side of the compressor. In the old style, the electrical connections are on the same side as the suction line and the discharge line. In the new compressors, the electrical is on the process port, or the suction service port side. That really isn't an issue. The electrical is easily rerouted to that side. No problem at all. So, with that being said, look at the documentation for that cross-reference. If you find that you need to have the original compressor but no accumulator, you need to let us know, because that's not acceptable. If you have the old compressor to replace with an old compressor, it must have an accumulator, the proper accumulator with it, or the cross-referenced new compressor. So with that, I'll show you how on this SK329 I've accommodated. So here is a compressor that has been replaced. I apologize, I don't have an old version to show you, but I think you can get the gist of what's going on here. So this suction line was tacked down to here. I've separated it, and in this case I only had 5/16 copper, so I used a piece of 5/16 copper, swedged it normally here, but I also swedged it on this end to fit into that 3/8 port more mechanically soundly. And then, as you can see, the discharge fits right in, no problem at all. And again, the electrical is on this side of the compressor, whereas in the old one it's on the opposite side. And actually, you can see, here's the old compressor, and you can see that there's the suction service port, and that's where the electrical is on this one. The only other trick to this is the mounting bolts, as you can see, are like right under the compressor. So it's tricky getting in there. I typically use some shims to hold the compressor up and have those bolts in there already. And then as I tighten it down, I remove the shims. That's the other trick, just the mechanics of getting that compressor fit in there properly. So, and then we'll I brought this up, obviously bring this down and insulate all the way to the compressor. So that's the ins and outs of replacing that compressor.